Our next request comes from Matthew, and it's a video game based on a movie I reviewed. As the title suggests, we're looking at the Owls of Ga'Hoole video game. We're back to the world of owls, but from a new perspective, because while the game is set during the same time as that film, it has an original story with some book elements. It can just be a nice little licensed game where players can be their own owls, who take part in various stories from the book series, but we don't get any of that, and we'll get to why later. The main production company behind the Owls of Ga'Hoole video game was Chrome Studios. They're an Australian company that has been around since the first PlayStation era, and they're best known for their work on Ty the Tasmanian Devil, and the reboot games for The Legend of Spyro. The DS version of Owls of Ga'Hoole was developed by Tantalus Media, who ported The Legend of Zelda Skyward Sword from the Wii onto the Nintendo Switch. Either way, both home console and DS ports were published by Warner Bros. Interactive Entertainment. For this review, I'll be looking at the PS3 version, because it's the one system I have immediate access to for this generation. Now, can this game expand the extended universe of the Guardians as much as the movie did? Let's find out. So out of the gate, we have a selection of owls to pick from, starting with the barn owl, the jack of all trades, the horned owl, which has less health for higher speed and attack, the great gray owl, the lowest speed and highest attack, and the spotted owl, which has the highest speed and lowest attack. If this were a different kind of owls game, it would be pretty neat to have our own owl character who can go on their own adventures and mingle with the main cast, but I digress. Once we pick our type, we learn about a Glauxian monk named Grittir. He was guarding the ancient Parok monastery, but one day he was overrun by a monstrous flock of birds known as the Hag's Fiends.
Various creatures stormed into the monastery, ruthlessly eliminating every soul in their path.
Now, the Hag Fiends are from the book series. Once thought to be extinct, they carried the features of both crows and owls, though this game makes them look like condors. They were also said to possess the evil powers of Nachtmagen, but here? Well, we'll get back to that. Grittir escapes the battle, but the other monks shamed him for his supposed negligence. This pushed him into isolation, but he was able to move on after finding a mate named Lygia. Together they had a child, but the Pure Ones soon found and killed them in their home. A team of guardians fought off their enemies and saved the child who was just born. And you'll be playing as that owlet, Shard, who got his name from a piece of eggshell clinging to him upon his rescue. Years later, he becomes a guardian in training under the tutelage of Alamir. If you remember Alamir from the movie, then I think you know where this is gonna lead.
You should know, Alamir!
But anyway, time for our first glimpse of gameplay. Being a game about owls, you're going to be flying the entire time and switching between free roam and on-rail segments. Of course, you still have to actually fly, which is going forward with R2. At first, I thought you needed to hold down the button to get him to move, because when you're stationary, you seem to move slowly. But no, one press is all you need. And until you learn how to boost at will, you just have to wait for him to go faster. This is going to be a problem, given how speed is important to gameplay. Like any flight-based game, movement controls are inverted. So down is up and up is down. When you go down, you start doing a dive, which fills your prowess gauge and boosts your speed. But that leads to another issue I have regarding movement. Right now things are fine when I was testing the controls, but once we get into the missions, you bump into the scenery all the time. For now, during this raid, Alamir tells you to disable a catapult. You do this by picking up some fiery coal and launching it onto the machine. All is going well, but...
What's that? Attack! No!
Well, still a better death than in the movie. But as Shard is surrounded by enemies, we see that it was just a night dream. Alamir wakes your character up, because he's serving as a teacher to you and another owl named Percival, voiced by Benjamin Diskin, aka Number 1.
Just as useless as his father.
This looks like another attempt to copy the Soren and Clud dynamic, but it isn't, and we're all the better for it. Ezarib interrupts to discipline Shard, despite Alamir's objections, and it's here where I noticed that the graphics aren't very good. The models at least show a variety of facial expressions, but it feels like something from the previous generation with how rough they look. And even that generation has models that stand the test of time. Anyway, Ezarib teaches you to lock onto things by using L1, so you won't need to use the control stick as much. He has you light torches, and then...
Ezarib, the rescue chore found a band of owlets approaching the tree, but some crows have blocked the way.
Ah, there's the Number 1 voice. Now we get into combat. Most moves need to be unlocked after defeating enemies, and with how much time you spend fighting, you'll get all those moves in no time. You start off with a simple strike, which could be used again if the enemy doesn't go down for the first time. Then there's throwing, which can cause a bit of damage if you toss someone into a wall, but that's rare. Now with armored enemies, you need to charge into them. Enough hits will knock the armor off their HP bar, allowing you to damage them normally. And as you attack enemies without taking damage, you'll slowly build up a combo meter. Your talons catch fire after 10 hits in a row, thus giving you a damage buff. This is important due to the enemy health scaling as you get deeper into the game, and the bonuses from buying armor doesn't seem to make much of a difference. The only other way to handle enemies quickly is through your ultimate move, Fall from Grace. This can only be used if your enemy is high enough in the air to trigger button prompts, and this is what it'll look like. Regardless of what move you use, you can only attack an enemy when the target reticle turns red, at which point Shard will start flying in to make a hit. Sometimes you might miss, but most of the time you do get a hit in. Just be careful, since you might end up hitting something. Yeah, if you want a drinking game, take a shot every time Shard bumps into something. I can't tell you how many times I was flying or battling an enemy when suddenly you run into the environment, and it happens constantly. And it's not just you, even your partner AI seems to bump into things. You also have a counter move when an enemy tries to get the drop on you. This causes Shard to parry the attacker and push them back. Only enemies that you can see seem to attack you, which is good because surprise attacks from behind would be the absolute worst from a gameplay angle. And even if you mess up on the counter, there is one last failsafe.
Do a barrel roll!
There's also the option to send out your wingmen to do the fighting for you, but only if a segment of your prowess bar is filled. Again, this is accomplished from diving, or from collecting coins, or shinies as they're called, or even hitting the air currents that give you a speed boost. You can also spend the bar on a frontal corkscrew attack that doubles as an attack and speed move, or a backflip for U-turns. If you time your attacks with the wingmen just right, you can do a little bit more damage. But your buddies can only deal with non-armored enemies, and when the bosses come around...
You serious?
Yeah, don't expect them to help. All told, I don't remember that my wingmen were available for use, so I spent my prowess bar for speed boosts. But that's enough about the gameplay for now. Let's get back to the plot. We get a reference to the movie's story when Soren and his band reach Gaul. There's a bit of a discrepancy between the game's version of events, since it states that Soren came with owlets. This isn't true to the movie, since some of his companions were adults. This leads to Alamir flying away to scout out the pure ones, thus leaving Shard and Parzival under the care of Ezarib. And this old owl wants to send you and Parzival off to do some investigation. Because, Well, he doesn't trust Alamir. We're now taken to Shard's Hollow, where we can choose our mission, visit the armory, and of course, view the gallery. The various art assets can be unlocked after beating each area's bonus mission, which just involves finding scrolls. I didn't bother with that, which is good because there are bonus missions inside the bonus missions. The main missions are divided into parts that push the story forward. Depending on how well you do, you can be graded with a gold, silver, and bronze medal. Going above and beyond leads to extra shinies that could be spent on better armor, and completing all missions in bonus areas results in extra lives. These replenish during the story missions, but aside from some thornier scenarios, I never really needed them. It could be because I got used to the combat, but even then there are still issues. And the bonus missions were a pain in the ass to do at first. You could only really do them after you unlocked more moves. There are 4 main worlds where Shard's adventures take place, besides the tree that is. First, there's the Desert of Kunir. You and Parzival investigate the rumors that owlets went missing there, and you run into an eagle named Streak. He's been looking into the disappearances too, and suspects that the desert bats are working with the pier ones. Streak joins up as a wingman, but first you have to follow him during this one mission, and you'll fail if you fly too far from him. Luckily, there's an icon on the lower left that'll warn you if you're too close to doing that. And you'll be using this interface in the other parts of the story. Anyway, you finally learn that the kidnapped owlets are stowed away in the bat caves. You start off the rescue mission by intercepting one of them from the bad guys. It's a mission you may do in the bonus areas, but here's where problems start to surface. When you grab an owlet, you're stationary for a moment before moving forward. Just waiting for Shard to get back up to speed takes too long, so you need to go faster with corkscrew or find a nearby air current. You also cannot use regular attacks while holding something, though countering is still on the table, and when you drop the owlets off, this might lead to you crashing into something. This doesn't happen for every item you hold. You can fling hot coals at structures, but for these owlets, countering and dodging is the way to go. But be careful when flying in to shoot, because you might end up
Closer you get to them.
crashing again? Not helping matters is the camera that can mess with your flying. It's a pain. But now onto the first boss of the game, the Bat Chieftain. You cannot attack him directly, probably because of that owl-messing fleck he has, which is also seen in the movie. So Shard has to throw fireballs at him, and you better not miss, because you also need to handle waves of enemies. It gets so troublesome that I decided to ignore the mooks and focus on the boss. Goddamn bats, there's no end to them! It's also easy to lose your fire claws, since if you take too long, you'll end up losing it. So what else can I do? But with enough persistence, I finally defeat the chieftain and scatter the bats. Among the rescued captives is an elderly owl named Uriah, who confirms the bats' alliance with the pure ones. And he teases a bit of information about Shard's father.
You're the very image of an owl I met on a visit to Perrock when I was scarcely out of the egg. An upright owl he was, noble of bearing, and with an aura of the valiant about him. His name was Grettir.
Also, he becomes your next wingman. Yay. Next area is the Forest of Tyto, where the pure ones have taken over. You'll be helping a small resistance group retake control over the region, and it starts with a bit of recon work. Don't get too close to the bad guys or else...
There are guardians on our trail!
Easier said than done, though. You are balancing between the extremes of flying in place and bursting forward. This is going to become a problem for a few missions yet to come, because once you meet the resistance, you're tasked with moving the owlets to a safer location. At first, it doesn't seem too bad. The enemies you need to fight aren't too much to handle, so transporting the owlets aren't an issue. But here's what you get after the first go-around.
It was a rough flight, but we got the owlets to safety. More carrier teams have evacuated the base. They won't start moving without you near them to keep them safe. Get back to the base and help transport them to the new headquarters.
Okay.
You heard right. You have to repeat the process 2 more times. And of course, the other carriers only move if you're close by. This isn't good when there are many more enemies to contend with, so getting everyone out safely becomes impossible. You can afford to lose a few from the attack, but your rewards won't be as good. This is also complicated by enemies who now have armor and could parry your moves if you don't mix your combos, and you gotta do all this while avoiding the... Never mind. I'm starting to think that maybe, just maybe, there wasn't any way to mix up the gameplay without beating yourself up. And it's here where the repetition starts to sink in. It's about beating the enemies. You do it again and again with little variation. This is true even in the later stages, because after you destroy the base of the Pure Ones in Tyto Forest, you hear rumors of a traitor guardian. But who could that be? Anyway, next up is the Glauxian Brothers Retreat, where Shard's father used to live. You begin with a racing mission with Parzival, which involves flying through rings like Superman 64. Hitting each of these things can be hard when you're going too fast or diving, but at least you can afford to skip a few. Parzival was always leading, but then the cutscene happens, and it turns out...
Well, I knew you were good, but I didn't know you were that good.
But you smoked me. Anyway, the monks living in the region have zero knowledge of the Flex. Whatever they knew about them was lost when Parak fell. They advise you to see a hermit named Cormac, who might know a thing or two. But Shard puts that on hold after seeing some bats nearby. He tries to tail them, which looks easy enough. Just gotta speed up when able and not linger for too long. What? Oh, that's bullcrap. I wasn't even that far away. This icon here was showing me that I was safe. So it was all a lie? I can't believe this. Anyway, you reach the base of the baddies, where there's a new annoying enemy type, the Hags Fiends.
The bats have brought with them unwelcome guests. Dispose of the intruders.
Now, I do like how the game treats them like a coven of witches, given how they sound and all. They seem to possess dark powers like in the original source material, but that's not true. The game's Hags Fiends are resorting to the flex provided by the Pure Ones. So if you try to rush in, you just get knocked back and stunned for a bit. You need to choose between throwing the Hags Fiends into walls, regular attacks, or your ultimate fall from grace move. Going for regular attacks means you have to keep locked onto them and wait for an opening. But even when the target reticle turns red, sometimes your attack doesn't register. Maybe I was a split second too late, or there are some bugs here. But either way, defeating them is so tedious. Anyway, we learn from Cormac that the Hags Fiends are taking some other monks to their stronghold, so Shard has to intercept them in the next mission, and there are major swarms of enemies to handle before freeing those prisoners, and then flying back to the enemy spawn points for another 2 rounds of combat. This takes too damn long, especially now that the Hags Fiends are a part of this. And I kid you not, but there was a moment where I was flying after an enemy when this happens.
They won't even see what hit them.
I swear, I was not hitting the brake button there. Why would I when I have a monk to save? So that's nice. On top of attacks not registering, I have to worry about stopping completely while in flight. Now, during the next mission, where I have to destroy the Fleck pillars at this mine, I was battling enemies like normal when I noticed that I was close to being out of bounds. And unlike, say, Star Fox 64, where the game just turns you around, you need to turn yourself around yourself or risk mission failure. I guess maybe they intended this game to be open world, but I don't know. Now I can't chase after enemies who go too far out. Also, by this point, I go into speedrunning mode since these enemies won't stop spawning. I just focus on destroying the Fleck barriers, then keep a few enemies on screen to minimize the amount of attacks going my way. There is finally some progress I can sense, but this isn't exactly fun, you know. And now it's time to fight the Hags Fiend Queen. Not quite as bad as the Bat Chieftain, but getting a shot at her means dealing with her bat minions holding up her Fleck barrier. It's just a matter of ignoring the enemies and focusing on her as much as possible, which is easier said than done. Once she's dead, the heroes regroup and confirm who's working with who. Cormac notes that Shard's father actually fought valiantly in Prowess, and only failed because the Hag's Fiends brought Flex with them. He was even close to dissuading the Hag's Fiends from attacking further, which Cormac took up after, but a great evil prevented a peaceful resolution. It's an interesting twist given that the Hag's Fiends are always the villains in the books. Too bad the game doesn't explore that idea any further. It's also here where Shard finds his father's battle claws. So guess who's getting a new set of claws that won't make a difference? Just in time too, because we're in the final main area of the game, the Beaks. With Alamir's return to Gaul, we're back to following the movie story. His report on the Pure Ones prompts the Guardians to act, and Shard knows all this from a letter written by Ezerib. This almost seems like a moment where you can team up with Soren to save the Guardians from Alamir's trap, but no, you fly separately from the movie's heroes.
The battle in the Beaks will truly test us, Shard. I will proudly fight by your side, my friend.
Thanks. Even though we hardly interacted, I'm glad to know that you deem me worthy. Thus, we have a long-distance sequence where rock formations appear off in the distance. And after that, your first mission involves saving your owl wingman from a Fleck trap. You're also around to see the main Guardian army fall into the bigger Fleck trap, only to be saved by Soren. So while the heroes of the movie take on Metalbeak and Clud, Shard's forces are infiltrating the Stone Palace. You're trying to destroy the catapults by tossing embers on them. But while you're doing this, that happens. And the catapults take a lot more hits to destroy, so get used to this back and forth. And once that's done, Shard is attacked by Alamir, which is a total retcon from movie continuity. And I guess to throw our hero off his game, Alamir says this.
Oh, we were well acquainted at Perak. Surprised? I thought with all of your snooping you would have guessed by now.
You murdered them all. My father, my mother.
In any event, the Pure Ones will soon emerge victorious.
It is better than what happened in the movie, but not by much. It also would have been nice to have more character development, which could have let that betrayal sink in. I mean, Shard's mentor was the same owl who made him an orphan? There should have been more emotional weight to that moment. But I can't feel anything here. In any case, Ezerib tells you to take out the signal tower. It's deja vu where you destroy the structure with coals before the enemies can stop you. And once that's done, you discover the entrance to the forge. Shard deduces that he can take down the whole palace if he destroys the forge.
Arm themselves. Hurry.
And you guys aren't coming with me because could have at least given me my wingmen, but no. Though in fairness, they would have been useless. But first, we have to get to the forge itself, which is behind these long corridors of stone and... is that lava? I think that's lava. The final level, naturally, has you destroying the forge before dueling Alamir. It starts with a chase through the cavern you flew from. You can throw fire at him to damage his armor a bit, but the real meat of the combat takes place in this large chamber. Unlike the other bosses, he fights like a regular Pure One elite. As long as you mix up your combo, you can do a lot of sustained damage. And there are no other gimmicks, no tricks, no enemies. Just one-on-one. He's literally the easiest fight in the game. And after all the struggles I went through to get to this point, I'm happy to fly away, only to be attacked again. But this time, he dies by my talons. Again, still better than in the movie, and thus, Shard laments how he feels like his mission for peace is going nowhere. But Ezerib assures our hero that some things are worth fighting for.
Pure Ones are gone?
Defeated, perhaps, but not gone. It's more than we can hope that such intolerance will stay buried forever. We are the eyes of the night, the silence within the wind. We are the talons through the fire, the shield that guards the innocent. We shall defend the meek, and vanquish the evil. We are the Guardians of Ga'Hoole.
So, that was certainly a game. It's obviously below average, but it's not the worst thing I've played. Honestly, the potential is there, but like a lot of licensed video games, it's limited by what the programmers are allowed to do. It feels like a product of half measures. Like, it doesn't quite follow the movie, but it takes place during it. It features an original main character, but there's little character development given to him. It has a potentially interesting flight system, but it's not very well executed. And for a PS3 game, its graphics feel underwhelming and last gen. It's also a bit on the short side, as I was able to complete the main story in under 5 hours. I imagine it takes a few more to 100% it, but I didn't want to. You can look up the gallery features on the internet easy. Playing this game makes me appreciate the movie more, because at least some good effort was put into everything about it. And I mean everything. So while I'm sure the game developers did their best, it just wasn't enough to place itself on the same level as the source material. You'd be better off watching the movie or reading the books. You get a lot more out of those than playing this game at least. Next time, we're going home. On the range. I'll see you there.